All right, I'm going to tell you a story, and it's a painful one. It's about a massive financial mistake. And no, this isn't about some scam or getting hacked. It was something way more common and honestly, way more dangerous. It was overconfidence. This is my story, and it ended up costing me over $500,000.
So you see this number, $850,000. That was 7 years of my life. 7 years of doing everything by the book. Disciplined saving, smart investing, carefully building my wealth. This was the absolute peak of my portfolio. This was the reward for doing everything right. And then this. This is what was left just a year and a half later. I personally wiped out more than $500,000 of my own net worth. And you want to know the worst part? The entire time this was happening, I thought I was being smart. I really did.
And that's really the heart of the whole thing. It wasn't bad luck. It was straight up hubris. I made a whole series of decisions, and believe me, every single one felt logical at the time. But they all added up to this catastrophic, compounding disaster. So let me just walk you through exactly how it all went down. Okay, so to really get why this happened, you've got to understand where my head was at. I wasn't some gambler, not a novice. I was what you'd call a smart investor. I was disciplined, I was informed, and I thought I was totally in control.
I did everything by the book. Started my 401k right at 25, knocked out 60 grand in student loans by the time I was 30, bought a modest house at 32, and by 2016, my portfolio had crossed that $500,000 mark. I was absolutely on track for an early retirement.
Then in 2017, a friend of mine suggested I meet with this financial advisor, a woman named Rachel. So I took the meeting, and her advice was, well, it was painfully boring. Seriously, it was the exact same stuff you read in every single personal finance book. There was no secret sauce, no clever tricks. It was all just discipline and patience. And this was the question that literally changed everything for me. On my portfolio, $525,000, her fee, that 0.85%, came out to about $4,500 a year. And I'm thinking, I've been managing my own money successfully for years. Why on earth would I pay someone that much for advice I already know?
And here's the math that really sealed the deal. This is what I was looking at. On my own, I've been averaging a solid 12% return. Rachel's approach, which was more conservative, would have been closer to 10.5% after her fees. Now, over 10 years, that's a $209,000 difference. To me, it felt like an absolute no-brainer. I'm saving money on fees and making more in returns. What could possibly go wrong, right?
Well, this is where it all started to go off the rails. My disciplined, kind of boring strategy, it was about to get completely torpedoed by the promise of just astronomical returns. The crypto bull run was officially here.
So by late 2017, it felt like everyone I knew was talking about crypto. I had a coworker who turned 5 grand into 80 grand, and here I was, having completely ignored it. That feeling of FOMO, the fear of missing out, it was overwhelming. I honestly felt like I was being left in the dust. So, January 2018, I jumped in. I moved $75,000 out of my safe, boring brokerage account and threw it into crypto. I told myself, hey, this is a calculated risk. Well, by the end of that same year, my calculated risk was worth just $18,000, a staggering, gut-wrenching loss. Now, a rational investor, they probably would have just cut their losses and moved on. But me, I couldn't accept that I'd been wrong. I was so convinced this was just a temporary dip. So I did the exact opposite. I doubled down. I poured another $85,000 in over the next couple of years. In my mind, I was buying the dip, being greedy when others were fearful. And you know what? For a minute there, it actually worked. The market just exploded in 2021. My total investment in crypto, which was about $160,000, it skyrocketed to a peak of $475,000. I hadn't just made my money back. I was up hundreds of thousands of dollars. My conviction felt totally validated. I thought, I am a genius. This was the absolute peak of my arrogance. My wife was begging me, please just cash out half of it. But no, I knew better. Friends were telling me to take profits off the table, but I was so certain this was just the beginning. So I let it all ride. Well, of course, Bitcoin did not go to $100,000. It crashed. Hard. And my refusal to take any of those profits, that wasn't just one mistake. Oh no, it was the very first domino in a whole chain reaction of financial disasters. Let me show you how these errors just compounded on each other. So first, the crash completely wiped out all my paper gains. Poof, gone. Then, the tax man comes knocking with a $38,000 bill for gains that didn't exist anymore. So to pay that, I had to sell some of my good long-term investments, and to top it all off, a margin loan I'd taken out to buy even more crypto got called in. That forced me to sell my best stocks at the absolute worst possible time. You see, every disaster just fed right into the next. So when the dust finally settled, what was the actual damage? Because it wasn't just about the money I lost on crypto. The real cost was so much bigger than that.
So let's just compare the two paths here. My path, the DIY path, left me with $485,000. Okay, but what if I had just stuck with Rachel's boring old plan? Well, my portfolio would be worth around $810,000 today. The difference is it's staggering. It's not even just about the money I actively lost. It's about the 6 years of compound growth that I can never, ever get back.
And that's not even the whole story. The damage went so much deeper. I had to stop my 401k contributions, which meant I lost out on my company match. That's free money. I paid thousands in margin loan interest. The stress was just immense. It affected my health. It nearly destroyed my marriage. The total real cost was easily over $500,000. So, okay, what's the lesson here? What can we learn from this absolute catastrophe? Really, it all boils down to a couple of key psychological traps that, honestly, almost any investor can fall right into. The first one is overconfidence bias. I had a few good years in what was a historic bull market, and I completely mistook that luck for being a genius. That's what led me to believe I could outsmart the market, take these huge risks and come out on top. Turns out, I couldn't. And the second big one is loss aversion. You see, psychologically, we feel the pain of a loss way more intensely than the pleasure of a gain. And that feeling, it made it impossible for me to just accept that initial loss on crypto. So instead of cutting it loose, I kept throwing good money after bad, desperately trying to make it back. It is a classic trap, and it just magnifies your losses every time. And all this brings us right back to that first decision, doesn't it? I chose not to hire Rachel because I wanted to save about $27,000 in fees over 6 years. But what did that saving really cost me? It cost me over $300,000 from my portfolio, not to mention years of stress and all those lost opportunities. And that right there, that is the single most important lesson from this whole mess. I thought I was saving money by going it alone, but in reality, I was paying the highest price imaginable. The most expensive financial advice you can get, it's often the advice you don't take. You can learn that lesson from my $500,000 mistake, and the good news for you? It's free.